911. What is your emergency? Yes, this is Patricia Vance from the Willow Creek Estates Board. There is a predator on my property. It's large, it's wild, and it looks like it has rabies. It came from that dump of a ranch next door. I demand you send a unit immediately before it mauls a child. That was the phone call that shattered a perfectly good Tuesday afternoon. And the wild predator Patricia was screaming about? That was Buster, my 10-year-old golden retriever, who was currently standing on her manicured lawn wearing a faded red bandana, wagging his tail so hard his whole body was wiggling, and offering her a slobbery, well-chewed tennis ball. The next thing I knew, 3 county sheriff cruisers came tearing up the road, lights flashing, sirens wailing, kicking up dust like they were responding to a bank heist in progress. Deputies jumped out, hands hovering near their holsters, scanning the perimeter for this beast. And there was Buster, confused but thrilled by the company, rolling onto his back in the grass, asking for belly rubs from the nice men with the shiny badges. The lead deputy, a guy named Miller who I'd known for years, lowered his sunglasses and looked at the dog, then at the hysterical woman on the porch. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat, "you said there was a dangerous animal." Patricia stood there, arms crossed over her pastel cardigan, chin high. "That is it. That beast trespassed on HOA property. It's aggressive. I want it seized and euthanized immediately." Miller looked at Buster, who was now licking his own paw. "Ma'am, dogs aren't usually arrested for being friendly. And he doesn't look like a threat. Looks like a very good boy." "I don't care." Patricia snapped, her voice shrill enough to crack glass. "He doesn't belong here. This is a private community, and animals from that filth pit next door have no rights here. I'm filing a report." I walked up from the fence line then, dusting off my jeans, taking my time. "Afternoon, Jim," I said to the deputy. "Sorry about the false alarm. Buster here just has a bad habit of thinking everyone wants to play catch." Deputy Miller tipped his hat. "Afternoon, Jack. Figured it was yours." Patricia cut in, stepping off her porch like she was descending a throne. "I don't care whose animal it is. This is criminal trespass. I am calling the board, and I am calling the city." Then she turned to Miller with a sneer. "And you, officer, do you know who you're dismissing? Do you know who I am?" Miller sighed, the heavy sigh of a man who didn't get paid enough for this. "Yes, ma'am, I know who you are. But I don't think you know who this is." Patricia rolled her eyes. "Some dirt farming rancher who thinks he's above the rules because he owns a few acres." "No, ma'am," Miller said, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That is Senator Jack Dalton, United States Senator. He owns this land, has for 20 years, and just so we're clear, his property line isn't part of your HOA." You should have seen the color drain from her face. It was like watching a sunset in reverse. Her mouth opened and closed like a goldfish dropped on the carpet. "What?" she whispered. I stepped forward, clipped the leash onto Buster's collar, and gave her a polite nod. "And that, ma'am, is my dog. Not a predator. Just a pet." But as I turned to walk away, thinking that was the end of it, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. An email notification. Formal complaint filed. Willow Creek HOA versus Dalton Ranch. Immediate action required. I stopped. I looked back at her. She wasn't embarrassed. She was furious. Her eyes were hard, calculating. This wasn't a misunderstanding about a dog. This was the opening shot of a war she had been planning for a long time. Let me back up a little, just so you understand the lay of the land. I bought the Double D Ranch about 15 years ago, way before I got sworn into the Senate, back when I was just a lawyer tired of the city grind. I wanted peace. I wanted dirt under my fingernails and horses in the stable. The ranch sits right on the edge of town, rolling hills, old oaks, pure Americana. Then came Willow Creek Estates. About 5 years ago, developers bought the land next to me, bulldozed the forest, and put up 50 identical beige houses behind a white gate. They called it a luxury community. I called it the dollhouse. And ruling over the dollhouse was Patricia Vance. Patricia was the HOA president, a woman who treated the neighborhood bylaws like they were scripture. She was in her late 50s, wore terrified pearls, and had a bob cut that didn't move in a hurricane. She believed in order, uniformity, and control. And my ranch? My ranch was chaotic, dusty, and loud. It was everything she hated. For years, she tried to get me to join the HOA voluntarily. She'd send gift baskets with enrollment forms. I sent them back. Then came the letters about visual harmony. She complained about my barn color. She complained about my truck. She complained that my horses were loitering near the fence line. I ignored it all because, legally, she couldn't touch me. My deed predated her subdivision by a century. But people like Patricia, they don't take no for an answer. They take it as a challenge. And Buster? Buster was the final straw. He was a local celebrity, honestly. He'd wander into town, get treats from the butcher, sleep on the porch of the general store. Everyone loved him. But Patricia hated him because he was the one thing she couldn't regulate. He didn't care about property lines or curb appeal. He just wanted to be a dog. After the police left that day, I thought maybe the humiliation would make her back off. I was wrong. It only made her get creative. About 3 hours later, I was in the barn checking on a mare when I heard a heavy diesel engine idling at my front gate. I walked out to see a tow truck backing up to my utility easement. 2 guys were hopping out, hooking chains to my solar water pump, the big unit that feeds the troughs for the horses. Patricia was standing there, arms folded, holding that damn clipboard. "Hey," I shouted, jogging down the driveway. "What do you think you're doing?" "Removing unauthorized equipment," Patricia said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "This pump violates the community noise ordinance and creates an eyesore for the residents of Willow Creek. We are seizing it." "You're on private property," I said, my voice dropping low. "That pump is worth $10,000. You touch it, and it's grand larceny." "We have a lien," she lied. I knew she was lying. Liens take months. "Load it up, boys." The driver looked at me, then at her. He hesitated. And that's when Buster, sensing the tension, did what dogs do. He barked. Not a mean bark, just a "hey, what's going on" bark. He trotted toward the truck. Patricia screamed like she'd been stabbed. "It's attacking. Get back. Defend yourselves." The tow truck driver panicked, dropped the chain, and scrambled into the cab. "Lady, I ain't getting bit for $100, he yelled. He threw the truck into gear and peeled out, leaving the chain lying in the dust. Patricia stood there, fuming. "You think you can intimidate us with that beast?" she hissed. "You think your title saves you? We will remove that animal, Senator. One way or another." "Get off my land, Patricia," I said, "before I call the real authorities." She stomped off, but the look in her eye, it wasn't just anger. It was hate. Pure, unadulterated hate. The next morning, things went from petty to dangerous. My niece, Sarah, who stays with me while she's finishing law school, came in from the mailbox looking pale. She was holding a cardboard box. "Uncle Jack," she said, her voice shaking. "There's no return address." I opened it. Inside were 20 photographs. Grainy, zoomed-in photos of Buster. Buster sleeping on the porch. Buster peeing on a tree. Buster chasing a butterfly. And then, at the bottom, a printed letter on HOA letterhead. Notice of violation. The animal known as Buster has been deemed a public nuisance and a threat to community safety. Recommendation: immediate removal or extermination. I stared at that word. Extermination. Sarah looked over my shoulder. "They can't do that, can they? They can't just decide to kill a dog." "No," I said, my hands tightening on the paper. "They can't. But they're threatening to. And that's a federal offense when you threaten a sitting senator, even if they cloak it in HOA nonsense." I didn't wait. I called my contact at County Animal Control, a guy named Charlie who I'd fished with for years. "Charlie, I need a favor. I've got a neighbor trying to weaponize your department against my dog." "I saw the flag on the system this morning, Jack," Charlie said. "Someone filed a report saying you're running an illegal kennel and harboring a vicious beast." I already quashed it. "But Jack, she's persistent. She's called 4 times today." "Thanks, Charlie. Keep me posted." I hung up, but the unease didn't leave. I knew Patricia wasn't working alone. She had a board. A group of sycophants who nodded at her every word. There was Peter, the vice president, a guy who looked like he'd sell his own mother for a discount on mulch. And there were others, faceless names on a roster. That night, to prove a point, I invited the local news crew out. We did a puff piece on sustainable ranching. I made sure Buster was front and center, wearing an American flag bandana, licking the reporter's face. It aired on the 6 o'clock news. The headline was "Senator's Dog, a Local Hero." I knew Patricia was watching. I knew it was driving her insane. But poking the bear has consequences. 2 nights later, the ranch was quiet. I was in my study reviewing a bill when the gate buzzer went off. I checked the camera. Black SUV. Government plates. I walked out. It was Agent Reynolds, Secret Service. I knew him from D.C. Senator, he said, not smiling. We received an anonymous tip through the Homeland Security portal. Credible threat involving unauthorized explosives and surveillance equipment on your property. I blinked. Explosives? Reynolds, you've got to be kidding me. We have to check, sir. The tip was specific. Said you were booby-trapping the perimeter to harm neighbors. I let them search. It took 2 hours. They went through the barn, the house, the sheds. Obviously, they found nothing but horse feed and old tractor parts. As Reynolds was leaving, he looked embarrassed. It was a waste of time, Senator. But the call. It came from a burner phone, but the ping bounced off a tower right in that subdivision next door. I know who it was, I said. If you can prove it, Reynolds said quietly. That's filing a false federal report. That's prison time. I didn't have proof yet, but I was about to get it. The very next night, we almost lost everything. We were asleep. Buster started barking, not his happy bark, but a deep, guttural warning. I grabbed my robe and ran downstairs. Sarah was already at the window screaming. The barn. Uncle Jack, the barn. I looked out. Orange light was flickering against the night sky. Smoke was billowing from the hayloft. I grabbed the fire extinguisher and ran. I didn't wait for shoes. I sprinted across the gravel, lungs burning. The fire was small. Thankfully, someone had thrown something through the open window, but it hadn't caught the main haystack yet. I doused it, choking on the smoke. When the smoke cleared, I saw it. A wooden crate, charred black. And inside, half-burnt, was an American flag. Someone had spray-painted the words "Get Out" across the stars and stripes in bright red paint. I stood there, shivering in the cold, holding that desecrated flag. This wasn't a neighbor dispute anymore. This was a hate crime. This was domestic terrorism. Sarah came running in, phone in hand, dialing 911. Who does this? She cried. Who burns a barn over a dog? Someone who thinks they're untouchable, I said, my voice turning to ice. But they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. We treated the barn like a crime scene. The FBI came out this time, alongside the local arson investigators. They took fingerprints from the crate. They took tire tread castings from the dirt road behind the barn. I walked the perimeter with Sarah the next day. We found the spot where they'd cut the wire fence. And right there, snagged on a barb, was a piece of fabric. Pastel yellow polyester. The same color as the cardigans Patricia wore every single day. We got her, Sarah whispered. Not yet, I said. This proves she was here, but she'll claim she was checking the property line. We need something undeniable. We need to catch her in the act. We set up the trap. Not a physical trap. I wasn't going to sink to their level, but a digital one. I bought high-end trail cameras, the kind hunters use that send video directly to your phone via satellite. We hid them everywhere. Up in the oaks, buried in the brush, mounted on the fence posts. And then, we waited. It didn't take long. Bullies always returned to the scene of the crime. 2 days later, my phone pinged. Motion detected, North Ridge. I opened the app. It was grainy night vision, but clear enough. Patricia and Peter, the VP, were creeping through the tall grass on my land. They were carrying something heavy, a large metal cage. A coyote trap. They're trying to trap Buster, Sarah hissed, looking over my shoulder. I watched on the screen as they set it up near the jogging trail, baiting it with raw meat. They were giggling, thinking they were so clever. They set the trigger and snuck away. I waited until they were gone. Then I walked out there in the dark. I didn't disable the trap. Instead, I removed the meat. I put a piece of paper inside the cage that said, "Smile, you're on camera." And then I rearmed it. But I rigged the door to be hair trigger sensitive. The next morning, the sun hadn't even risen when my phone pinged again. Motion detected. We watched the live feed. Patricia came back to check her trap. She saw the cage was empty, but the door was still open. She leaned in, confused, trying to see where the bait went. She stepped inside, just 1 foot, to adjust the mechanism. Clang. The door slammed shut. The latch engaged. Patricia screamed. She thrashed against the bars, but it was a heavy-duty steel cage meant for wolves. She was stuck. Peter, who was standing guard, panicked. He tried to open it, but he was so nervous he jammed the lock. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I let them sit there for an hour. Let the sun come up. Let the joggers from her own neighborhood run by and see their HOA president trapped like a rat on my land. When I finally walked out there with Sarah and Buster, Patricia was hoarse from screaming. "Let me out! she shrieked. This is kidnapping. No. Patricia, I said, leaning on the cage. This is poaching. You set an illegal trap on federal land. Because as a senator, my primary residence is protected under specific statutes, and you got caught in it. I should leave you here for animal control. We let her out eventually, but not before Sarah filmed the entire thing and uploaded it to the Neighborhood Next Door app. The caption? HOA president caught setting illegal traps on senator's property. It went viral in 10 minutes. But humiliation wasn't enough. We needed to know why. Why go to these lengths? Why risk arson and federal charges for a dog? That night, we got our answer. We saw lights in Patricia's garage. It was late, past midnight. The garage door was cracked open about a foot. Shadows were moving inside. Come on, I told Sarah. Bring the camera. We snuck up through the hedgerow. We got close enough to hear voices. It was Patricia and Peter. They were arguing. He's not backing down. Peter was saying. The fire didn't work. The trap didn't work. We need to stop before we go to jail. We can't stop, Patricia yelled. Do you know how much the developers promised us? If we get that land, if we get him to sell, we get a percentage of the expansion. That's millions, Peter. Millions. I froze. It wasn't about the dog. It wasn't about the noise. It was a land grab. They were trying to make my life so miserable that I'd sell the ranch cheap so they could expand their subdivision. We need leverage, Patricia continued. If we get rid of the dog, he breaks. He loves that mutt. We take the dog out. He leaves. Take him out how? Peter asked. Patricia's voice dropped, cold and devoid of humanity. We don't trap him next time. We shoot him. Tomorrow night. I have my husband's rifle. My blood turned to ice. I looked at Sarah. She was crying, her hand over her mouth. I burst through the side door of the garage. I didn't care about warrants or procedure in that moment. I was a man protecting his family. You lay a finger on my dog, I roared, and I will bury you. They spun around. On the table in front of them were maps. Blueprints of my ranch, overlaid with new property lines for condos. And right there, circled in red marker, was my house. The file was labeled Operation Sunset. Senator. Patricia gasped, trying to cover the maps. You're trespassing. I'm investigating a conspiracy to commit murder and grand larceny, I said, taking a photo of the table. I heard everything. And guess what? So did the camera. Sarah stepped in, phone raised, recording. We have it all, Patricia. Patricia sneered, regaining her composure. Who's going to believe you? It's your word against the board. We own this town. I know what you do, I said, leaning in close. But you have no idea who I am. You think I'm just a politician? I'm a man who swore an oath to destroy enemies of the peace. And you just made the list. We left, but the threat hung in the air. Tomorrow night, she had said. I called the sheriff. I called the FBI. But the wheels of justice turn slow, and psychopaths move fast. The next night, the ranch was on lockdown. I had floodlights on. I had my shotgun by the door. But Buster is a dog. And dogs have ears we don't. Around 2 a.m., a firecracker sound popped in the distance. Buster bolted. He heard something I didn't. He shot through the doggy door before I could grab his collar. Buster. No. I grabbed my rifle and sprinted into the darkness. Sarah was right behind me with a flashlight. Another shot rang out. Crack. Then a yelp. A high-pitched, painful yelp that tore my heart in two. No. I screamed, running blindly into the woods toward the property line. Buster. We found him near the creek bed. He was dragging his back leg. There was blood on his golden fur. He looked up at me, eyes wide with confusion and pain, and gave a weak tail wag. I fell to my knees. Oh God, buddy. Oh God. He's hit. Sarah screamed. Uncle Jack, he's bleeding. I scooped him up. 80 pounds of dog, but in that moment he felt light as a feather. I ran. I ran back to the truck, Sarah pressing a towel to the wound. We drove to the emergency vet at 90 miles an hour. Don't you die on me, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Don't you dare die. The vet took him in. It was a graze wound to the hip. Deep, lots of blood, but it missed the artery and the bone. He was going to make it. As I sat in that waiting room, covered in my dog's blood, something inside me broke. And something else hardened. I was done with courts. I was done with being polite. I was going to burn their world down, and I was going to do it on the biggest stage possible. The next morning, while Buster was recovering in surgery, I went back to the ranch. I checked the cameras. We had it. The muzzle flashed from the edge of Patricia's property. The silhouette of a person holding a rifle. It was blurry, but combined with the audio from the garage, it was enough. But I didn't just go to the police. I went to the podium. I called a press conference right there on the ranch, on the very spot where Buster was shot. The national media showed up. They love a senator in crisis. I stood there, looking into the cameras. I held up the picture of Buster recovering in the vet clinic, bandaged and sedated. "My name is Jack Dalton," I said, my voice shaking with controlled rage. "And last night, the president of the Willow Creek HOA tried to murder my dog." The shutters clicked like rain. This wasn't an accident. This was a calculated attempt to terrorize a family into giving up their land for a real estate deal. They burned my flag. They trapped my property. And when that didn't work, they opened fire. I held up the blueprints we stole from the garage. This is Operation Sunset, a conspiracy to steal land through harassment. Then, I looked right into the camera lens. "Patricia Vance, the FBI is on their way to your house right now. But before they get there, I want the whole country to know what you are. You are a coward." The fallout was nuclear. Within an hour, #JusticeForBuster was trending #1 globally. The HOA's phone lines melted down. The police raided Patricia's house an hour later. They found the rifle. It matched the ballistics. They found the emails between her and the developers. They found the receipts for the gasoline used to burn my barn. Patricia Vance was arrested on live TV. She came out in handcuffs, screaming that it was a setup, that she was the victim. But nobody was listening. Peter turned state's witness faster than you can say plea deal. He gave up everyone. The developer pulled out of the deal so fast they left skid marks, desperately trying to distance themselves from the dog killer HOA. But I wasn't done. 3 weeks later, I stood on the floor of the United States Senate. The chamber was packed. Up in the gallery, Sarah sat next to a very bandaged, very happy golden retriever. "Mr. President," I said, "we often talk about property rights and personal freedoms in the abstract. But for me, it's personal." I introduced the Pet Protection and Property Integrity Act, a federal bill that made it a felony to use HOA bylaws to harass, intimidate, or harm the animals of homeowners, and establish strict federal penalties for land grab conspiracies disguised as community management. "This isn't just about a dog," I told the Senate. "It's about the right to be safe in your own home. It's about standing up to petty tyrants who think a clipboard gives them the right to play God." The bill passed unanimously. It was the only thing Democrats and Republicans agreed on all year. Because everybody loves a good dog, and everybody hates a Karen. 6 months later, the ranch is quiet again. The barn is rebuilt. The fence is mended. Willow Creek Estates dissolved their HOA board. The residents, horrified by what had been done in their name, voted to banish the covenants. They're just a neighborhood now. No presidents. No fines. Patricia is serving 8 years in federal prison for arson, conspiracy, and animal cruelty. She lost her house, her pension, and her reputation. As for me, I'm sitting on the porch right now. The sun is setting over the hills. Buster is asleep at my feet, twitching in his dreams, probably chasing rabbits he'll never catch. We won. But looking at the scar on his hip, I know the cost. It makes you realize something. You can have all the titles in the world, senator, president, CEO, but the only title that really matters is neighbor. And if you can't be a good one, you don't deserve the land you stand on. So, I have a question for you folks. Have you ever had a neighbor who pushed you too far? Who thought their rules were more important than your rights? Did you fight back, or did you move? Let me know in the comments. And do me a favor, go hug your dog. You never know when you might need them to save your life. This is Jack Dalton, signing off from the Double D. Stay safe out there.